Alpha King kisses her in front of her ex, he whispered. Let him watch what he lost. In the great hall, nobles and courtiers moved like shadows themselves, whispering secrets and gossip beneath painted masks. Among them, Leora stood quietly, her hands clasped at her waist, eyes scanning the room with a careful calm. She had returned to the court after years of exile, each step bringing back memories she had fought to forget. Her heart tightened as she glimpsed Eric across the hall. He had changed little in appearance, yet everything about him radiated the arrogance of a man who had believed the world belonged to him. His sharp gaze found hers immediately, and for a moment the room seemed to shrink. Leora's pulse quickened, though she tried to steady her breath. Years had passed, and yet the pain of betrayal felt as raw as the day it had happened. "You've returned," a voice murmured at her side. It was calm, deep, and carried a weight she had not known she was missing. She turned to see him, Kale, the Alpha King. Even without a crown on his head, there was no mistaking him for anything but a king. Broad-shouldered and imposing, he seemed to command the very air around him, yet his gaze held an unexpected softness as it met hers. "I did," Leora said quietly, forcing herself to appear composed. "The kingdom needs me, I suppose." Kale's lips quirked, almost imperceptibly, and he inclined his head. "The kingdom needs strength," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her chest. "And I can see it in you, even now." The words sent a strange warmth through her, but she forced herself not to show it. Kale's presence was both unnerving and magnetic. Unlike Eric, who had always measured her worth against his own pride, Kale seemed to see her as she was, flawed, powerful, and unbroken. The court gathering was underway, music and laughter filling the air, but beneath it all, tension crackled like fire in dry leaves. Eric approached, a false smile on his lips, his eyes gleaming with calculated malice. "Leora," he said, bowing with a mock courtesy, "you've changed, perhaps not for the better." Leora's jaw tightened. "And you, Eric? Have you learned humility, or do you still parade it as charm?" Her voice was steady, but Kale, standing a few steps behind her, noticed the way her hands trembled slightly, barely perceptible, yet enough to tell him she was on edge. Eric's smile faltered. He took a step closer, his tone dripping with the same old arrogance. "I hoped the court might welcome me back, but it seems they've already chosen their favorites." Before Leora could respond, Kale moved. Silent as a shadow, he appeared beside her, his presence a shield against the past she had tried to leave behind. He glanced at Eric, and his dark eyes, intense and unyielding, said more than words ever could. "You will speak carefully," Kale said, his voice low, a warning hidden beneath the calm. "Or your words will mean nothing at all." Eric's pride flared, and he opened his mouth to retort, but Kale's presence alone stopped him. The subtle shift in the air, the pull of authority, the quiet power Kale radiated, made it clear that he would not tolerate disrespect. Leora felt a flutter of something unfamiliar. Relief, yes, but also a stirring curiosity about this man who seemed both danger and protection wrapped into one. The gathering continued, but Leora found herself drawn to Kale's side. He spoke little, yet every word carried weight, every glance held a hidden meaning. He asked her questions about her time away, about the secrets she had kept but never pressed too hard. There was a patience in him, a careful respect that she had never encountered in the court before. As the night deepened, the moon rose high over the palace, casting a pale silver light across the gardens. Kale led her out into the courtyard, away from prying eyes and the whispers of nobles. Mist swirled around their feet, curling like ghostly fingers around the marble pathways. "You are stronger than you know," Kale said, his voice softening. "And the world has been unkind. But you are not alone, Leora. I see you. I see what others refuse to see." Leora's chest tightened. She had spent years convincing herself that strength and independence were enough. Yet the way Kale looked at her, seeing past walls she had built around her heart, made her question everything. There was longing in his gaze, but also something deeper, a recognition, a promise that he would stand by her no matter what. She hesitated. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Cale's gaze darkened, a shadow passing over his features. "Because no one should face the world alone. And because I do not forgive those who would try to take from you what is yours." His words were a warning, a promise, and a confession all at once. The air grew colder, and in the distance, Leora sensed a movement. Eric watched from the edge of the garden, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. Leora felt the old fear rise, fear of being claimed, of being hurt again, but Cale's hand brushed against hers, gentle yet firm. The contact sent a jolt through her, uniting caution and desire into a complicated knot she could not unravel. "Do not let him frighten you," Cale murmured. "He belongs to the past. You belong to the future, and I will not let him take it from you." Leora's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but the shadows of the past were long and deep. And yet, she felt something she had not felt in years, hope mingled with a dangerous thrill. Cale took a step closer, their faces inches apart, and for a moment the world seemed to vanish. Moonlight danced across his sharp features, illuminating a promise that was unspoken but understood. The court, the nobles, the gossip, they all seemed irrelevant here, in this silent courtyard filled with mist and possibility. "You are not what they made you believe," Cale whispered, his voice a brush of warmth against her ear. "And I will show you. I will protect you not as a king, but as someone who knows what it is to lose what he cannot forget." Leora's breath caught. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the safety of solitude, but something in Cale's words, in the unwavering strength behind them, made her heart ache with longing. A sound broke the moment, a sharp exhale, a shuffle of feet, and Leora realized that Eric had not left. He stood at the edge of the courtyard, watching them with a twisted mix of jealousy and rage. His presence was a reminder of everything she had suffered, everything she had survived, and everything she feared she might face again. Cale's gaze flicked to him, dark and commanding. Without a word, he closed the distance between them and Leora, subtly yet deliberately, signaling that she was his to protect, his to stand beside. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear, relief, and a dawning sense of something far more powerful. The night seemed to hold its breath as Cale leaned slightly closer, and for a heartbeat, Leora thought she would feel the warmth of his lips, the certainty of his claim. But instead he stepped back, letting the tension linger, the electricity between them crackling like fire in a dry forest. "You will not face him alone," Cale said quietly, almost to himself, yet she heard it clearly. "I will not let the past harm you again." Leora's lips parted, wanting to speak, wanting to thank him, wanting to confess the storm of feelings she had tried to bury. But no words came. She only nodded, aware that her heart had begun to shift, that the chains of fear and old sorrow were loosening, if only slightly. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver light over the palace gardens, Leora realized that her life had changed in an instant. She could not yet name what was stirring inside her: fear, desire, hope, or the thrill of being seen for the first time in years. All she knew was that the Alpha King had entered her world, and everything familiar had been set aflame. Eric's shadow lingered in the distance, silent and brooding. He had seen the closeness between them, had felt the invisible boundary Cale had drawn around her. And in that moment, Leora knew, with a sudden sharp certainty, that the past was not done with her yet, and that her future would demand courage she was only beginning to understand. The night wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of mist and danger. And in the pale glow of the moon, Leora and Cale stood together, bound by unspoken promises, and watched the shadow of what was lost and what was yet to come. Cliffhanger. Eric clenched his fists, his teeth gritted. He had underestimated Cale, and he would soon discover that some losses were impossible to reclaim. The morning sun spilled gold across the palace walls, painting the courtyards with light that could not reach every shadow. Leora walked beside Kale in silence, the air between them taut with unspoken words. The previous night lingered in her mind, the way he had protected her, the way he had looked at her as if she were more precious than the crown he wore. And yet, she felt uneasy. Eric's presence still haunted the edges of her thoughts like a storm waiting to break. "You must learn to control your gift," Kale said, breaking the quiet. His voice was calm but firm, echoing through the empty hallways. "The kingdom is not kind to those who are unprepared." "And neither are those who seek to harm you," Leora nodded. She had long suspected that her abilities, a rare magic inherited from her ancestors, would draw attention. That attention often brought danger. "I want to," she said, "but I do not know if I can. I have tried before and I failed." Kale stopped walking and turned to face her. The morning light caught the sharp lines of his face, giving him the look of a statue carved from obsidian and gold. "Failures are lessons," he said softly, yet with the authority of a king. "Every time you rise after a fall, your strength grows, and you, Leora, have already survived more than most could bear." Her chest tightened at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not Eric, not the court, not anyone. Kale saw her, not just her power but the fears she carried, the burden she bore, and the courage she thought she had hidden. As they entered the training hall, Leora's nerves returned. The room was vast and empty, the polished floor reflecting the sunlight that streamed through high windows. Kale gestured for her to stand in the center, his eyes never leaving hers. "Focus," he instructed. "You must first understand that your magic flows from who you are, not what you fear." Leora closed her eyes and tried to center herself. The air felt alive around her, humming with an energy that seemed to respond to her heartbeat. She felt it stir, like a river beneath ice, restless and waiting. Slowly, she extended her hands, and the first faint glow of power shimmered around her fingers. Kale watched silently, noting the subtle tremor in her hands and the determination in her eyes. "Good," he said, his voice low. "Do not doubt yourself. Fear is natural, but it must not rule you." Hours passed, and the lessons continued. Kale was patient, guiding her through control, teaching her to feel the flow of magic as a part of herself rather than something foreign or frightening. There was a rhythm to their movements, a dance of power and trust that neither had expected. Leora began to feel a connection, not just to her abilities but to Kale himself. His presence was steady, commanding, and yet comforting like a beacon in a storm. By late afternoon, fatigue weighed heavily on her. She sank to a bench, wiping sweat from her brow, and Kale approached, offering a hand to help her stand. She accepted, and as their fingers brushed, a spark of electricity ran through her, leaving her momentarily breathless. Kale's gaze softened, and he did not look away. "You are stronger than you realize," he said, "and braver than you believe." Her heart fluttered at his words, but she looked away, forcing herself to focus on the lesson rather than the man. "I am not ready," she whispered. "Not yet." Kale did not argue. He only nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Then we wait," he said. "But know this, strength is not only in power. It is in the courage to face what you fear, and the wisdom to trust those who stand beside you." The quiet intimacy of the training was broken by a sudden commotion at the palace gates. Courtiers rushed in, faces pale and eyes wide. Eric had arrived, and his presence immediately unsettled the court. Whispers followed him, questions about his intentions and his loyalty. Leora felt a chill creep up her spine. He had returned not as a visitor but as a threat, seeking to undermine her growing bond with Kale. Kale's jaw tightened as he observed Eric. There was a darkness in his gaze now, an edge of warning. "Do not worry," he said quietly to Leora. "He will not touch you. Not here, not anywhere." But Leora could feel the tension mounting, the way Eric's eyes lingered on her with a mixture of resentment and desire. She had once loved him, had trusted him, and now she realized that some wounds never fully healed. And yet beside Kale, she felt a strength she had never known. Days passed, and the lessons continued. Leora's magic grew stronger, more controlled, but so did the connection between her and Kale. There were moments when their hands met, when their eyes lingered too long, when the air seemed to thrum with energy. Leora found herself thinking of him even when she was alone, wondering what it would mean to trust him fully, to allow herself to feel more than fear. Eric, sensing the growing bond, began to act. He whispered rumors in the court, subtle accusations, questions meant to sow doubt. Does the king favor her because of her skill or because of something more? He murmured to anyone who would listen. Leora felt the sting of gossip, the weight of old insecurities, but Kale's presence remained constant. He never dismissed her, never belittled her, never allowed her to question her worth in his eyes. The true test came during a grand ball in the palace, celebrating the return of noble alliances. Leora wore a gown of deep green, her hair flowing like a river of night, her eyes alert and aware. Eric approached, his smile sharp, his words carefully calculated. "You have grown bold, Leora," he said, bowing slightly. "Perhaps too bold for your own good." Before she could respond, Kale stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. The room seemed to hush as he moved beside her, his arm brushing lightly against hers, not possessively, but as a clear signal that she was under his protection. Eric's smile faltered as the realization hit him. Leora was no longer the woman he thought he could control. She had changed, grown stronger, and now she stood with a king whose authority was absolute, whose power was undeniable. Kale leaned close to Leora, his lips near her ear, and whispered with a mix of amusement and warning, "Do not let him test you. He has already lost what he cannot regain." Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. The words were more than a promise. They were a challenge, a declaration, and an invitation all at once. Eric, unable to contain his frustration, stepped forward, attempting to draw her attention with a sharp gesture. The room watched, anticipating a confrontation. And in a moment that would be remembered in the annals of the court, Kale did something no one expected. He drew Leora close and kissed her, softly, firmly, and with undeniable intent in front of everyone. The court gasped. The music stopped. Eyes widened in shock. And as their lips parted, Kale whispered words that burned into the memory of every witness. "Let him watch what he lost." Leora's heart pounded. Shame, pride, and an unspoken thrill collided within her. Eric's face twisted with disbelief and anger, and for the first time, Leora felt not fear but power, the knowledge that she was no longer a pawn in anyone's game. She had Kale at her side, and together they were unstoppable. The ball ended in murmurs and whispers, but Leora could not think of anything but the intensity of Kale's gaze, the strength of his hand holding hers, and the way the world seemed to tilt when he claimed her, even for a moment, in front of the man who had once betrayed her. That night, as she walked beside Kale through the moonlit gardens once more, she realized that the past would never fully leave her, but neither would the future. And in Kale's presence she felt the stirrings of something extraordinary, the beginning of a bond that could defy even the darkest shadows. Eric, lurking at the edge of the garden, clenched his fists. He had underestimated Kale, and he would not forget. The Alpha King's presence, his confidence, his unspoken protection of Leora, had revealed the truth. Some losses were permanent, and some desires could not be reclaimed. And as the night wind whispered through the palace trees, Leora understood that her journey had only just begun. The lessons were not just about magic. They were about courage, trust, and the fire that burned between her and Kale. And the fire was dangerous, consuming, and utterly irresistible. Cliffhanger. Eric swore to reclaim what he had lost, setting in motion a chain of events that would test Leora's strength, Kale's authority, and the bond that was growing between them. Shadows were gathering, and the night held more than whispers. It held danger, secrets, and the promise of a trial that would shape all their destinies. The palace slept under a blanket of mist, but the quiet was deceptive. Shadows moved where they should not, and the distant hoot of an owl carried more warning than sound. Leora awoke to a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Something was stirring, danger, whispers of betrayal, a past that refused to stay buried. Kale was already awake, standing by the balcony, the first rays of dawn casting long shadows across his strong features. His eyes, dark and watchful, scanned the horizon. Leora could see the weight of the kingdom pressing on him, yet there was a different tension in his gaze today, a storm that spoke of challenges yet to come. Eric has not given up, Kale said without turning, his voice low but steady. He seeks allies in the shadows. He hopes to exploit fear, doubt, and perhaps even your powers. Leora swallowed hard. The thought of facing Eric again, of confronting the man who had once held her heart, was frightening. But beside Kale, the fear felt tempered by strength. He had become her shield, her anchor, and perhaps the first person in years who saw her not as a victim, but as an equal. "I am ready," she said quietly, though her hands trembled slightly. "I have learned much, and I will not run." Kale turned, studying her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You have grown stronger than even I imagined," he said. "And tonight you will need all that strength. But know this, you are not alone. Not now, not ever." Even as the morning deepened into day, word arrived that Eric had gathered a group of conspirators at the edge of the kingdom. They sought to exploit a long-forgotten curse, a dangerous spell that could unravel the royal lineage itself. Leora and Kale prepared to confront him, knowing that the confrontation would demand more than courage. It would demand every skill, every ounce of trust between them. As they rode toward the forest where Eric waited, the air grew colder, thick with mist and the scent of pine. The ancient trees towered like guardians of an older, wilder world. Leora felt her magic stir at the edges, sensing the tension, the hidden dangers that lurked in the shadows. Kale rode beside her, steady and confident, his hand occasionally brushing hers, not possessively, but as a silent assurance of partnership and protection. They found Eric at a clearing where the forest seemed to breathe, alive with a subtle, ominous energy. His companions, hooded and whispering incantations, moved around him like shadows. The moment Leora stepped forward, the air shifted, charged with magic and intent. "Leora," Eric said, his voice dripping with false charm, "I see the king stands with you. But perhaps you forget the price of power, the weight of history, and the dangers you cannot control." "I remember everything," Leora said, her voice steady, clear. "And I have learned that strength comes not from fear, but from courage. I will not let you harm anyone, nor will I let the past define me." Eric's eyes narrowed, and he raised his hands, calling on the forbidden power he had sought to control. The forest responded, shadows twisting unnaturally, as if the trees themselves recoiled. Leora felt a surge within her, a connection to the energy that had always been hers, waiting to be mastered. Kale moved closer, his presence a steadying force. "You are not alone," he said again. "We face this together." The first clash was subtle, a wave of energy that shimmered through the mist, testing boundaries, testing courage. Leora extended her hands, letting her magic flow freely. She remembered Kale's teachings, the rhythm of control, the feeling of strength drawn from within rather than forced. Light danced around her fingers, weaving with his presence like a second heartbeat. Eric faltered, sensing that the power he had underestimated was now beyond his control. His companions, seeing his hesitation, wavered, and the forest seemed to shiver in anticipation. Leora stepped forward, her confidence growing with every breath, every movement. The curse, long hidden, began to dissolve under her will, her magic strong and pure, tempered by courage and the support of Kale's unwavering presence. Kale reached her side, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. "Together," he said, and in that moment Leora understood fully. Power was not just her gift, but their bond, their trust, their unity. Eric tried one last desperate effort, a surge meant to overwhelm and claim, but Leora met it head-on. With Kale by her side, the energy shattered, dissipating into the forest like mist under sunlight. Eric's eyes widened in disbelief, realizing that he had lost not only the battle, but the chance to reclaim her. "You underestimated what you could never control," Leora said, her voice steady, strong, like a sword drawn from the depths of her soul. "And now, you must face the consequences of your choices." Eric's shoulders slumped, the pride he had clung to so tightly breaking under the weight of reality. He looked at Leora not with desire, but with the stark understanding that some things, once lost, could never return. Kale's gaze, steady and unyielding, reinforced her claim, not through force but through undeniable presence. The forest seemed to exhale, shadows retreating, light returning to the clearing. Leora's magic, once feared and unpredictable, now shone like a beacon, controlled and potent. She had faced her past, confronted fear, and emerged victorious, not just against Eric, but against the doubts that had haunted her for years. Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers again, fingers intertwining. "You have done what few could," he said, pride and something warmer in his voice. "And I could not be more certain you belong not to fear, but to your own strength, and to me if you choose it." Leora looked at him, her chest swelling with a mixture of relief, triumph, and something far more tender. She had found a protector, a partner, and perhaps the beginnings of something deeper, a bond forged in fire, shadow, and trust. The moment held, the forest silent around them, as if the world itself acknowledged the victory and the transformation. Then Kale leaned close, his lips brushing hers, not hurriedly, not forcefully, but with the gentle certainty of a promise fulfilled. Leora responded, her heart soaring, the connection between them undeniable. When they pulled back, the world seemed brighter, clearer, filled with possibilities that had once seemed impossible. Leora knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but with Kale by her side, she felt ready for anything. Eric, defeated and humiliated, was escorted away by his remaining allies. The pride he had once wielded like a weapon was shattered, leaving only regret and bitterness. Leora watched him go, understanding that the past would never fully vanish, but it no longer held power over her. She had reclaimed her own story, her own strength, and her own heart. Back at the palace, the court murmured in awe at the tale of her victory, but Leora paid little attention. Her eyes sought only Kale's, and in his steady gaze she found the reflection of her own journey, transformation, courage, and the beginning of love that could endure even the darkest shadows. That night the palace was quiet, save for the soft rustle of curtains and the occasional whisper of wind through the halls. Leora stood on the balcony, watching the moonlight ripple across the gardens. Kale joined her, silent, placing a hand over hers. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. "Of what?" she replied, turning to him. "Of what comes next," he said, voice low but certain. Leora smiled, a slow, confident curve of her lips. "No," she said, "because I know that whatever comes, we face it together." Kale's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. "Then you are truly free," he said, "and nothing, no one can take that from you." They stood together, silent but united, gazing at the stars that sparkled like distant flames. The kingdom was at peace for now, the past vanquished, and the future unwritten. But for the first time in her life, Leora felt ready, not just to face the world, but to embrace the love and strength that had grown between them. And as they held each other beneath the silver glow of the moon, the whispers of the night seemed to carry a single truth. Some bonds are forged not by blood, not by crowns, not by fear, but by trust, courage, and hearts willing to rise together against the darkness.